Hey, grade 8. So welcome to your lesson on lenses and vision. A few guiding questions to talk about before we get started. So going into this, the idea is that hopefully you can answer these questions after the lesson is done. So the first question that I want to ask is, how do glasses work? What about them makes it so that people can actually see better? Why can they see better with glasses for some people than without? And then also, what causes people to have different prescriptions? So what physically is the reason why one person will have one prescription that doesn't work for another person, right? What's different about their eyes? So those questions we're hopefully going to answer throughout this presentation and more, but let's get into it. So let's talk about what a lens is. A lens is a curved piece of transparent material. Again, transparent meaning that light can travel through it no problem, such as glass or plastic is typically what's used for a lens. And lens refracts as it passes through a lens, causing the rays to bend. You've learned all about refraction in the previous lesson, but you understand that refraction takes place as I move from a less dense to a more dense medium or vice versa. So I'm changing mediums from one to another. And when that takes place, the speed of light changes, and that change in the speed of light causes light to bend. So typically when we're talking about lenses, it's going from air to the glass or the plastic, which is a more dense medium than the air. So as light comes in, right, at an angle of incidence, then the angle of refraction going into that more dense medium is going to be closer to the normal. So the angle of refraction is going to be lower than the angle of incidence. And that's, again, just because of the fact that the light is changing speeds. But if we change the shape of the lens, we can actually change, based on this refractive property of light, we can change how the light kind of goes on the other side, what the rays do on the other side. So we're going to talk about two different types of circular lenses. They're called circular lenses because of the fact that they're curvy. So it's like a part of a circle has either been cut out of the lens or two circles overlap and give us the shape of the lens. So the first type is a double concave lens. Again, I'll remind you that cave is the key word you want to look for there, because it's like a cave going into it, right? That kind of shape. So with the double concave lens, we have thicker at the top and the bottom, and then it's much thinner in the middle. Now this diagram shows it very dramatically. It normally wouldn't be this much of a difference between the top and the bottom and the middle, but it's trying to show you what the shape would look like. For a double convex lens, this is a bit different because instead we have it large in the middle and then very small at the top and the bottom. So it's smaller at the top and bottom than it is in the middle. Again, this is really dramatic. Normally the difference between the middle and the top and the bottom is not massive, but it's enough to change how the light refracts through. So what do these two lenses do to rays as they go in? Well, when I talk about a double convex lens, or sorry, double concave we'll talk about first. So I have the cave on both sides. When light travels through that, the rays are going to diverge on the other side. All right, so diverge means it's spreading apart, going different directions. So concave spreads the rays apart. Well, if I have a double convex lens, okay, like this, that's going to actually cause the rays to converge or come together. You'll notice that convex and converge share the first four letters, which is going to be part of our memory trick for all of this. So if you're like, how am I going to remember that? Well, we have tricks to help you remember it that we're going to go through later on, so don't worry about it. This next slide is going a little bit past what you need to know, but I think it's important for you to make sense of how we know what images are going to look like a bit through lenses. Before we get into this, I'm never going to ask you to actually draw a ray diagram like this one, showing refraction through a lens. You'll have to show refraction going from one material to another, but not like this, right? Stuff that you've already done in the previous topic. But for this kind of a ray diagram, it shows us what the image is going to look like. And in a future day, you're going to watch a YouTube video that really explains this much better than I can with some great animations. But when you look at a ray diagram, you can determine what an object will look like through the lens by looking at the point where the rays meet. So if I take a look at This diagram, which has a double convex lens, right? So it's bulging out on both sides. If I take a look at these two rays, they meet up right here at this point. So if I go from this middle line to the point where the rays meet up, that's how the image is going to appear or be observed through that lens. So for this particular lens, this double convex lens, I would actually see an inverted object, okay, because it's going to be upside down. That's why it's going this direction instead of up. And it's going to be smaller, which we call diminished. So it's going to be smaller at this point. Now I can change where this object is, so I can slide it from, where the focal point is to 2 times the focal point. I could put it in between, and that will actually change how the image will appear through that lens, which is interesting. Maybe you've seen stuff like this if you actually take a magnifying glass, right, and you play around with that magnifying glass, that there's kind of a sweet spot. Oh, right, you can't see it, but you know what I'm saying. Right there, I got the big eyes. Right, there's a sweet spot where things show up well, and then as I go further out, things get weird, right? It's getting weird. So the distance from the lens to the object really matters for the image that's going to be able to be seen through that lens. But important for you to know that where the rays meet up, okay, in these ray type diagrams, that shows you what the image is going to be through that lens. All right, so let's talk more specifically about these two types of lenses, the double convex and the double concave. And the reason why we're getting into these is because we're going to talk about how they fix different problems with vision, which is really interesting and applies to our lives, right? So a convex lens is a converging lens. Again, I'll remind you that I have this conv and conv. And converging means coming together. Okay, that's important to know. If you don't know what converging means, or converge, that means that it's coming together, bringing them closer together. So meaning it refracts rays so that they come back together. Images formed by a double convex lens can be inverted, okay, so they can be upside down, or they can be erect if the object, this should say can be erect or can be upside down or inverted if the object is far enough away from the lens. I guess that's just talking about it all together. I forgot how I wrote this. So that's fine. Can be inverted, and then this is really meant to be like a bracket upside down if the object is far enough away from the lens. Can you think of anything else that uses, or any objects that actually use a double convex lens for technology? So where have you seen double convex lenses before? Well, I showed you one example already, and that's a magnifying glass. So if I have a magnifying glass, that is a double convex lens, as well as a film projector actually has a double convex lens, or an overhead projector, and that's because they're trying to enlarge the image. So if I have a converging ray, they go past and then they go large and large and large after they actually converge, and it's going to actually cause a nice large image on the other side. What's interesting about that is when we talk about overhead projectors and film projectors, the image actually would normally be upside down. It would be inverted. So it uses mirrors inside to actually change that so it ends up being right side up. A double concave lens is a divergent lens. So this causes rays to actually spread apart over time. So rays get further apart after going through a double concave lens. Light passing through the thicker, more curved areas of the lens will bend more than the light passing through the thinner areas. And this is used in things like flashlights. So that's how we actually get that beam spread coming out of the flashlight where it gets a lot larger. It's used within cameras. So there's different uses for this as well, despite both of them being used for glasses of different types, which we're going to talk about. So how do we remember what both types of lenses do? Well, we remember because of the conv for convex lens converges rays, so brings them together. Well, cave lenses, concave lenses, diverge rays. So I like saying cave diver for that, right? And that helps me remember what's going on. So concave lenses, diverges rays, spreads them apart, cave diver. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the human eye. We're going to talk about both the anatomy of the human eye and then also talk about different disorders and how we can fix them with different lenses. So let's get into it. First of all, the lens in a human eye is a convex lens. So we actually have a lens that is within our eye that is constantly changing shape based on the image that we're looking at. So we actually have muscles that will change the shape of that lens as we're looking at something. Lens takes light rays and by refraction focuses them to a point at the back of your eye called the retina. So the retina is where light is actually detected and turned into electrical signals that then get sent to your brain. So it's this area on the back of your eye that's full of cones and rods, which are different types of cells that detect different light. And those cones and rods then send the signals through the optic nerve to your brain. Focusing of the light rays of the lens allows us to see the object image where the light converges. This is why when you take a look at an object at one depth, other depths look blurry because the image, right, the lens is refracting the light from the object you're looking at to properly be on your retina, while the other stuff is out of focus because it's not properly focusing to the right place on your retina for you to be able to see detail. So let's talk a little bit about different disorders for the eye, and then we're going to go more in depth with the different parts. So for abnormal eyes, we're going to talk about two different problems that can occur. We're going to talk about eyes being too long and too short. So generally what happens to people is their eyes over time, over their lifetime, will start to change size, and they'll either become shorter or longer. Some people are born with vision that isn't great, but typically it kind of onsets as time goes on, where their eyeballs change shape, and as a result, their lens is no longer refracting the light to the retina properly, but instead it's either stopping the image kind of too short, how it's refracting, or too long. So it's going either short of the retina or it's going past the retina. So by using lenses, we can fix it so that the image is hitting the retina right as it should. So when I have an eye too long, if it's too long, well, then the image is forming in front of the retina instead of on the retina. So the rays are coming together and they're stopping before we actually get to the retina. People with this condition are called nearsighted, and the reason why is they can actually see near pretty well, but they can't see as well when they're looking at something far. So when we talk about nearsighted, farsighted, we're talking about how you can see instead of focusing on the bad part of your vision. So if you're nearsighted, you can see things that are near quite well, but you do poorly with things that are far away. We use concave lenses to correct this because it spreads out, diverges, right, cave diver, diverges the rays so that instead of coming together sooner, they actually will come together a little bit later because the concave lens is causing the rays to diverge just a bit, so they come together later in the eyeball. Now, let's say that your eyes instead are too short. So the image is actually forming past the back of the eyeball, but again, they're not hitting the retina properly. People with this condition are called farsighted. They're actually able to see further away, but they have struggle seeing things that are up close. So the way to fix this is to bring the rays together so that they converge a little bit sooner. So I'm going to use a double convex lens for that, which will, again, just cause the rays to come together a little bit sooner so that it hits the retina properly instead of that image forming past where the eyeball would be. So this diagram shows it great, and that the image right now, if the retina was right here, it would be perfect, but by using this convex lens, the rays converge just a bit before coming to the eye, and now as a result, they're going to come together at the perfect point right at the back of the eye on the retina so that you can see the objects properly. So that's for eyes too short. This diagram is kind of nice. It shows both. So here I have the myopia, right, where the eyeball is just a little bit too long, and by using that double concave lens and diverging the rays, then it ends up coming together right at the back for the retina. Well, if I have hyperopia, I never said what it was called, hyperopia. Anyways, when it's a little bit too short and the image is going past the eyeball, if I use that double convex lens, then instead it's going to reach the back just perfectly because it converges the rays before it reaches the eyes just a bit, so that it will come together sooner at the back of the eyeball. So how do we remember this? Well, I've got 2 tricks for you that contain everything about this that you've learned so far, basically. You just have to memorize these sayings and then you should be good. I went diving in a long cave near here. So I went diving in a long cave. I had to keep on going way, way, way far to the back. Just near here, just near Medicine Hat. This is a lie, by the way. I've never been cave diving. But the key words is nearsighted. Okay, so near here, nearsighted eyes are longer, long cave, and need concave lenses, yeah, to diverge the rays. So there's the diving part again. So that's that saying. If you just kind of memorize that, okay, so I went diving in a long cave near here, then you can hopefully from that piece together the key words to know that nearsighted people have longer eyeballs. So as a result, we use double concave lenses to diverge the rays just a bit so they hit perfectly on the retina as they should. The other trick, maybe not as good. The converse convention for short people was far out. It was amazing. Yeah. So the converse convention for short people was far out. So short eyeballs are far-sighted. They can see far, but they can't see as well near. And the way that we fix this is we use a double convex lens, which converges the rays. Okay, so double convex lens, which converges the rays. So again, the converse convention for short people was far out. That's your saying for that one, and hopefully that helps. If you write down those 2 sayings on a test or a quiz, I think it will really help you to remember kind of how all of this works. So now let's get a little bit into the parts of the eyeball and learn more about those parts. So first of all, when I have an eyeball, we're going to talk about basically the parts that you see here and talk about what they do and how they work. So let's go through it just kind of one piece at a time. So first of all, we have the cornea on the outside, and it's just a protective clear layer that allows light to travel through. It's not the lens, it's just the outside kind of part. It needs to be nourished with fluids and stuff to basically keep the cells, because it is cells, of the cornea alive. The aqueous humor is a clear liquid, and it nourishes the lens and maintains pressure. So that is essentially just right after, and it nourishes the cornea as well. It's right after the cornea. You've got some fluid that's just built up there that is nutritious, good nutrient-rich fluid, and again, keeps pressure to keep the shape of the eye. The iris is the colored part of your eye. That's the color of eyes that people see. What the iris does is it opens or closes in order to control the amount of light that enters the eye. So in order for us to get an image that's not too bright and not too dim, the iris controls how much light actually travels into our inner eye. And then the pupil is the hole in the iris. It's actually just the gap in there. And the reason why it's black is because no light is escaping from the pupil. All the light that goes into the pupil goes in. It goes into your eye. So black, just being the absence of light, shows that that light is not bouncing back. The lens is what refracts the light entering the eye to make it to the retina. So the image hits properly on the retina so you can see things. And the lens is amazing because it can actually change shape in order to focus on stuff. And the way that that happens is using the ciliary muscle, which is on both sides, but it actually changes the shape of the lens. So as the muscle contracts or flexes, the lens will actually get thinner and thinner and thinner, which will, as a result, change how the light travels through, which is fascinating. So you might have actually experienced eye strain, right? When you look at something really, really close for a while, and it feels like your eyes are tired. Maybe if you're looking at the screen all day, for example, with online learning, your eyes feel tired. There's a reason for that. It's actually because you have a muscle in your eye that's worn out. It's tired of changing the shape of that lens in order for you to be able to see a really close object. Vitreous humor is fluid within the eye that helps it keep its shape. So again, we have fluid in there that is maintaining pressure and shape of the eyeball. So that's what that is, vitreous humor. So we have two types of humor, right? And when we talk about humor, we're just talking about fluids. So we have the aqueous humor, and then we have the vitreous humor in the middle. Then we have the optic nerve. The optic nerve is connecting the eye to the brain. So this is where the signals, all the neurons, are that connect the two things in order for you to actually have those electrical impulses from the retina travel to your brain. And then your brain takes those impulses, those signals, and changes it into an image, right? And that's you seeing. Retina, really important. It's a light-sensitive area. It's where images form and it's detected, right? So that's where the cones and the rods are that detect the light. If we were talking about a camera, which we're going to get into in just a second here, that would be like the digital sensor at the back of the camera, okay, that actually detects the light and then changes it into a signal that then gets stored on your memory card. So here's just another view of an eye. So we have our cornea, that layer on the outside, then we have our aqueous humor right here. We've got, we don't worry about this, but we have our lens that changes shape. We have the iris, and then the pupil would be the middle hole where things go through. The iris changes the size in order to allow more light through. Our lens that changes shape in order to refract light differently when it makes it to the retina on the back. And then we have the optic nerve that carries the signals. So, quick knowledge check. I'll ask you and see if you can remember our sayings from earlier. What causes farsightedness? So remember that the converse convention for short people was far out. So we have short eyeball. It's a little bit shorter than it should be. How can it be corrected? With a double convex lens. Okay, converse convention, double convex lens which converges the light so that the light rays can meet up a little bit sooner on your retina, allowing you to see. So let's compare the eye and the camera and talk about how they're similar and how they're a little bit different. When you see objects, what's happening is light from an object is actually focusing on your retina. In a camera, the lens refracts the light and the digital sensor, or the film, if you're talking about an old camera, senses that light. And that's kind of the same between the retina and the digital sensor in a digital camera. When we're talking about focus on a camera, that would involve different lenses that move kind of forward and backwards inside the camera, and that allows to keep the object in focus at whatever depth you're looking at. In the eye, instead, we have those ciliary muscles that change the shape of the lens to keep the object in focus instead. So we actually have a lens itself that changes shape. A camera instead works by having two lenses that will come closer together or further apart in order to keep things in focus. In us, as those eye lenses change shape, that's called accommodation. And as you get older, it gets tougher. Your lenses actually stiffen up a bit and are not as flexible instead, so it loses its ability over time to change shape as much. A key to preventing this would actually be making sure that you are not looking at the same depth all the time. It's kind of that whole, like, if you don't use it, you'll lose it sort of idea of you need to make sure that you are using that changing of shape of your lens all the time in order to make sure that your vision stays good. For bringing in the light in a camera, we have a diaphragm that controls the aperture, which is how much light enters the camera. And maybe if you've ever gone to photography, you've learned about aperture. It's how much light can make it in. Well, with our eye, we have instead the iris, the colored part of the eye that changes shape to allow more or less light to come in. So we have two eyes here that are under different light conditions. So I'll ask you, which eye would be in lower light? And actually all they've done here is they've just covered up one of their eyes for a while so no light was getting in, and then they've released it and then taken a look. And the answer is this eye is for low light conditions. So it's allowing more light to come in, while this is under highlight or bright conditions. When you go into a dark room, you're not able to see something for a while till your eyes adjust. The thing that's adjusting is your iris is just basically opening up, becoming larger and larger. So it's dilating so that you can see more because more light is able to make it in to your retina. So that's what's taking place. So again, for a camera, it's the diaphragm, the aperture, and for us, it's the iris. All right, we already kind of talked about this already. This is a bit of a repeat, but when we talk about a camera, the thing that's actually seeing the image, detecting the image, is the film or digital sensor. And then for the eye, it's the retina. The retina is right at the back of the eye, and that's where all of our cones and rods are, where a lot of them, the biggest like kind of amount of them is right back there, and that allows us to detect the light. Now we do have cones and rods kind of throughout the rest of our eye, and that allows us to have things like peripheral vision and stuff, okay, but we have a really, really high amount at this one point at the back of our eye. So one last thing, I thought we'd talk about eye exercises and eye strain, especially given the fact that, you know, online learning probably results in a lot of eye strain. So some tips for eliminating that eye strain and really helping it in order to make sure that your lens is able to move back and forth and your ciliary muscles don't get tired of changing your lens shape all the time. So the first thing is the 20-20-20 rule, that every 20 minutes you should look at an object at least 20 feet away for 20 seconds. So find something that's really far away and look out for at least 20 seconds to allow your lens to change shape as your ciliary muscles relax. So this is great if you were by a window. If you're able to take a look outside through that window at something that's far away for 20 seconds, that would be fantastic. And then the other thing is to not let your eye dry out. So put a note on your computer or whatever saying, hey, blink. Because sometimes when we look at computer screens, we don't blink as much as we should, and then we're not keeping our cornea moist and so on, and it causes issues over time. So that would be another kind of thing to do to make sure you're not going through a ton of eye strain with this online learning. Well, that's it. Long lesson, but that's it for today. Have a good one.